Welcome to the Pyramyd Insider. I'm Tyler Patner. Thanks for joining us today for another Insights edition. That's where we answer questions that you guys pose to us frequently. And today we are talking all about this kind of new debate, pellets versus slugs. One of the hot new trends in the airgun industry right now has been this new ammunition type slugs, right? For small bore guns specifically, because slugs have been used in big bore guns and obviously on the firearm side for a long time. But as far as where they fit into the airgun world, you may have seen your favorite YouTuber using these in a hunt recently, or maybe you've just seen some posts on forums about them, but maybe you're not so sure where they fit into your airgunning world. So we're gonna try and answer some of those questions today, when you should be using slugs versus pellets, what kind of advantages they might offer, and where a pellet's more appropriate than a slug. So all those things we're gonna kind of dive in, take a look at the performance in terms of terminal ballistics of a slug versus a pellet, and try and get some good information that's going to make the decision a little bit easier for you guys. Now the pros for slugs are very simple. They hit very hard, they retain a lot of velocity and energy as they travel, and they buck the wind quite well. And the reason for this is because they have a higher ballistic coefficient than their pellet counterparts. Now on the negative side, slugs do cost a fair bit more than pellets at this point in time. They can be a little particular in terms of what barrels they shoot well out of from an accuracy perspective, and because they're carrying more velocity and more energy downrange, you do have to concern yourself a lot more with pass-through. And by that, of course, we mean what happens to the projectile after it goes through your intended target, and this is particularly for hunters. Now in the win column for pellets, that low cost by comparison to slugs is a definite plus. They're usually very accurate at shorter ranges, out to 50, 60, sometimes even a little further than that. That's where wind comes into effect there. But they're usually very accurate, and they work in a very wide range of guns very well. So you can usually find a couple of pellets that shoot well in one gun or a variety of guns. Now, unlike our slugs, pellets are going to dump a lot of their energy into whatever they're hitting, so you don't have to worry as much about pass-through. Now on the negative side, we hearkened to it a little earlier. Because they have a lower ballistic coefficient, they're going to get to the target with less retained energy, less retained velocity. They're going to be more susceptible to the wind, and they're not going to hit as hard downrange as your slugs are, which is really why they are intended for shorter range use. And again, 50, 75, and yes, you can shoot them accurately to 100, but really that's in that range where you're going to want to start to use a slug or consider using a slug. Now you notice on our chart there, we threw out that hot buzzword in the industry, and this is firearms, air guns across the board when you talk about long range shooting, ballistic coefficient. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, ballistic coefficient is basically just the expression of a projectile's ability to overcome air resistance or fight drag. And in layman's terms, the higher the ballistic coefficient, the better a projectile's ability to fight that resistance, that drag in flight, which means it's going to be, in theory, more effective at retaining its energy, retaining its velocity as it flies downrange. Now, while we're not going to be calculating the ballistic coefficient of each of these rounds today, basically, guys, it's okay to assume in this particular instance that out of the same gun that your slugs are going to have a higher BC, carry more energy than your pellets are, and that's okay. For today's testing, we're going to go 22 caliber all the way through, just because that's where all of the manufacturers have come to play to start with in that slug market. So we have a couple options there where other calibers are still filling out those lines. So for our slugs today, we have the FX Hybrid weighing in at 22 grains. We have the JSB KnockOut, the 216 variety, coming in at 25.4 or so. And then we have the 23 grain 217 H&N HP slug. And since all of our slugs are hollow points, figured we'd do the same thing on the pellet side, give us the most expansion here. So we have the Predator Polymag coming in at 16 grains, the old standby as far as hunting pellets go. We have the relatively new JSB Hades coming in at 15.89 grains. And then we have the H&N Baracuda Hunter Extreme coming in at 18.5. Now we need a gun to shoot all of these projectiles in that we know is going to shoot them well with good repeatable accuracy. So we've chosen the Rapid Air Weapons HM1000X in the 22 caliber. The Lothar Walther poly barrel in this thing seems to shoot slugs quite well, as it does pellets. So we know we're going to get a lot of energy, and we're going to be able to hold good accuracy with all of these projectiles. So without further ado, let's head out to the range and send some slugs and some pellets into some gel. So looking over all of this data we've now gathered, really the big takeaways for me that JSB Hades is doing a great job in terms of both expansion and not over penetrating as far as pellets go, at just 4¼ inches of penetration there, and 28% larger diameter once it came out of the gel as well, is doing a great job of expansion overall. And on the slug side, I mean, it's pretty obvious the FX hybrids do a nasty, nasty job expanding to over 10 millimeters from their starting size, and 47% expansion is just insane, and just 3¼ inches of penetration is also really impressive, meaning they're dumping a lot of energy with both that Hades and this FX hybrid in a relatively short distance, which is exactly what you want if you're hunting. All right, so now that we've got some data, seen some results downrange in the gel, let's talk about some pros for pellets and some pros for slugs. Now, starting with pellets, if you look at it, you do get some good expansion out of these hollow point pellets, and they do a pretty good job as far as cavitation goes and damage, affected area upon initial impact. And another pro for me, at least, there's much less potential risk with a pellet once it passes through game, or even if you miss, than there is with a slug. Now, for slugs, there are two real advantages that I see. Now, this all stems from the fact that they deliver more knockdown power down range, right? So even without crazy good expansion that we saw out of the FX hybrid, you don't get as much expansion out of the other two options here. But even without that, they are hitting that gel really hard, which means you're going to carry more energy and give you the ability to maybe take a little bit larger game more effectively at closer ranges, or conversely, stretch your legs out and shoot further than you are able to with a pellet. Now, from a downside perspective, of course, we know that slugs have a relatively high price point, especially when compared with those pellets, but you're gonna know that going in. So yes, a little bit of a con, but it's a known con, right? And the other real downer for me is that slugs on the whole, there are exceptions to this, but on the whole do not shoot as well as pellets do in as wide a variety of guns. What I mean by that is that not all guns are this HM1000X, not all guns have a poly barrel, not all guns are FXs that have interchangeable liners. Now, there's not a great option for springers, multi-pumps, lower powered stuff out there as far as slugs go right now, but who knows, that could very well change in the future. And as far as the negatives for pellets go, I think they're pretty obvious for most folks. You're not going to be able to shoot them as far consistently, especially when you introduce wind into that equation. You're going to have more drop at distance, and of course, the energy side, the low BC, you are going to have more energy and velocity lost over the course of that pellet's flight path than you're ever going to see with a slug. So suffice it to say that really you have to answer this question for yourself and for your applications. I know for me, I'm going to be shooting pellets probably 90% of the time. There are going to be a few of those instances where I'm going to go out pesting at longer ranges where slugs are going to give me an advantage. Maybe also some times where I need to take out a coyote or something in the backyard and I'm going to step up to a slug because I want to hit it and hit it hard. And that's okay, right? But you have to know what you're using it for. And of course, there is that application to the gun you're using perspective as well, where maybe your gun's not going to shoot slugs accurately enough to get the job done. So that's always a consideration. But the great part of this, and the reason we can have this conversation, is because there's great slug options out there now. Just a couple years ago, this was really like super niche in the market. And now we have plenty of manufacturers come into play with a lot of options, a lot of different weights, and I think that's only going to expand in the future, and I'm very excited to see what happens with this slug side of the market as we move forward. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. We enjoyed making it. This one was very interesting and a lot of fun. If you'd like to see more content like this, answering some questions, let us know what you'd like to see in the future down below in those comments. And further, let us know what you thought of the results today. Were they surprising to you? Are you going to be switching to slugs? Are you going to stay with pellets? Why? Let us know down in the comments. We'd love to have that conversation with you guys. And if you do have further questions about slugs in today's video, you can always find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. It's a great place to continue the conversation. If you enjoyed the video, throw us a like. We appreciate it a ton. And don't forget to subscribe, turn notifications on so you know when we upload new videos. For The Insider, I'm Tyler Patner. Thank you again for tuning in today, and we'll see you at the next one.